Welcome to the 2017 Revolutionary Sports Show. I'm your co-host Corey Sullivan. Over there we have
Brian Duchaine.
my man Brian. How are you doing?
And it's always fun. We get off work, come straight back here, and then we can do a show. So, I mean, can't complain, you know? What about you?
There we go, man. Trying to get to the point where you don't have to go to a different work. You could just come here and hang out with us, and get started with the season. We're gonna get kicked off with the New England Patriots playing host to the Kansas City Chiefs on Thursday Night Football. First game of the season, awarded to the Patriots for winning the Super Bowl this past season. Congratulations to them. Tom Brady, another year older, is now at that ripe age of 40. Who knows how much longer he'll be around the league, but getting it started, it hasn't been a good year for the Patriots to start it off. Cyrus Jones, one of their top draft picks last year, went down with a knee injury, and Julian Edelman, one of their top receivers, one of Tom Brady's favorite targets, also down with a knee injury. They have brought in Brandon Cooks, and they did bring in Stephon Gilmore for their offense and defense, respectively. It's something to add more weapons for Tom Brady as he is on his way out of the league eventually in the next couple of years, if not this year. And one last hoorah for the Patriots, but they're looking good. Tom Brady, as you know, one of the best, if not the best, quarterback of all time. Brandon Cooks and a couple other weapons on the offense. This should be a nice homecoming for the Patriots, a nice opening to the 2017 season. And over on the other side of the football, over on the other stands, if you will, the Kansas City Chiefs are kind of in the same boat. Spencer Ware went down in the preseason with a knee injury, believed to be he will be out for the entire year. And Kareem Hunt, a rookie from Toledo, amassed over 1,800 total yards for Toledo last year, and is looking to create something now with Spencer Ware out of the picture, and the offense needing something. They still have Tyreek Hill, a offensive weapon, deep threat. Who knows how he'll respond to his second year in the NFL. And DeAnthony Thomas, another weapon. But outside of that, offensively, they're not the scariest team. They lost Jeremy Maclin, just straight up cut him. I don't see the Kansas City just having enough firepower, especially with an injured running back, a rookie running back who has never played an NFL game in his life, to come in and beat Bill Belichick and Tom Brady at home. Are you seeing anything, or what do you see from this matchup?
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you. I mean, you're looking at New England, like you said, maybe the GOAT, Tom Brady, greatest of all time, just coming in there. And especially at home, I don't really think you can pick against New England. Granted, the Seahawks did go in there and get a win, but the Seahawks are different. They're not really a division rival or anything like that. They're not in the same conference. They don't really study anything really about New England. So New England probably doesn't study them as hard. So they went in there, and I know that they probably don't know enough about each other to kind of plan for that. But in New England, you know that it's going to be, same conference. They're going to go in there. They're going to know a little bit more about each other because they play similar teams. So they can kind of plan for it and be like, hey, Kansas City's coming in. What do we know about them? Because Seahawks, NFC, AFC, it's always going to be a different matchup. But then AFC versus AFC, you know a little bit more about each other. And then, if you wanted to get into different conferences and stuff like that, like the Seahawks and the Rams, that could be even more of an extent. But in this situation, it's just an AFC versus AFC matchup. But New England, I don't think you can pick against them at home when it is an AFC versus AFC matchup. I think there was some kind of stat that was crazy. They'd only lost like one AFC game at home in the last, I don't know how many games, but I'm not picking against New England at home. And we have seen pretty much backups step in for KC at times and kind of tear it up. We saw Charkandrick West do it, I think it was last year or 2 years ago. And then they did lose Jamal Charles in the offseason. So it's not really the same KC team. I think you could say they're going to plug in this running back or try some special teams guys. They're going to go out there. They can experiment a little bit, but it's not going to be that Jamal Charles caliber that is just going to go out there and run for over 100 yards or anything like that. So I think Tom Brady's going to have a day. And as long as the New England defense can show up to a certain extent, I think Tom Brady can put up at least 25, 30 on Kansas City and make it a day at home.
Yeah, I agree with you. We're staying over here in the AFC East. We have the Bills and the Jets battling it out probably this season for dead last place. Two very unimpressive teams. The Jets are rolling out with Josh McGowan. I had to look over my notes to see who their quarterback was. That's how terrible he is. I believe Christian Hackenberg is on that depth chart as well. Lil Powell and Matt Forte are, keeping that running game strong. And Jermaine Kearse, the superstar stud out of Seattle, Washington, or not even from, he's not from Seattle, but he played for the Seattle Seahawks, went to UW, and he's the number one receiver for the Jets with Quincy Enunwa out for the year. Needless to say, the Jets just are not looking good. Defensively, they have a great defensive line, although they just shipped Sheldon Richardson to the Seahawks for their beloved Jermaine Kearse, but they also did get a second-round pick out of that. So a team that I believe is looking towards next year, cut some cap with moving Sheldon Richardson, and I'm sure that Jermaine Kearse cutting will be on the horizon, especially playing with quarterbacks like Christian Hackenberg and Josh McGowan. I'm really not seeing a huge year. 1,000 yards, 10 touchdowns, I think that's out of the question. But on the other side, the Bills are not doing too well either. They shipped both of their receivers pretty much to the Rams. Sammy Watkins and Robert Woods both playing in LA this year. They did pick up Zay Jones. They also made a deal with the Eagles to bring in Jordan Matthews. So Tyrod doesn't have no weapons. LaShawn McCoy won't see 8 in the box every down, but definitely a lot of pressure on LaShawn McCoy this year. Tyrod has to prove that he can be a threat in the passing game. And, when I did see a Seahawks game last year, I believe, when they played the Bills, and Tyrod was looking good. So he has the good play in him. Let's see if he can put it together for a full season. But, in this game with two of the worst teams, not only in the AFC East, but in the entire NFL, I think I'm going to go with the Bills on this one because they're the home team, pretty much. What about you? What do you think of this matchup?
Yeah, I agree. I'm going with Buffalo in this one. Tyrod Taylor, I know you went over it last year. You said he's more of a game manager, and he is very efficient when he goes out there. He's not the best quarterback, and I don't really see him as a Pro Bowl or anything like that, Pro Bowl caliber quarterback, that is. But he does use his legs, and he can get out of the pocket. He can run for it, and then every once in a while he makes a nice throw that you're like, hey, I didn't know Tyrod Taylor could do that. But, you looking at the depth chart, you mentioned Christian Hackenberg. We were just talking about it. I watched him a lot at Penn State. I wasn't a huge fan, and every time they rolled through to the Lions or the Seahawks, I was like, please don't take this guy. I don't want him on either of my teams. I don't really like how he plays. I'm not a huge fan. And then, of course, he ends up on the Jets. So Josh McGowan and freaking Christian Hackenberg being your two main guys, I'm not really sold on that. And then you said Jermaine Kearse being a number one receiver. I was skeptical as him being a number 2 receiver in Seattle, and I was like, please get rid of this guy so we can move somebody else into the role at number 2 and one receiver for the Jets. If you're making Jermaine Kearse the number 1 receiver, I think you got a problem there. So, I'm going to stick with Buffalo, and I think Buffalo gets them. The line 8.5. I think Buffalo might win by a touchdown, something close to the line, but I'm picking them regardless because I'm not real sold on either of the quarterbacks for the Jets, and I think Tyrod will manage the game, if you will.
No, I agree with you. Upcoming, we have after that game, or I guess at the same time as that game, we have the Eagles of Philadelphia taking on that team in Washington. What do you see from Carson Wentz and the Eagles in his debut of year number 2?
Yeah, this one, I'm not really sold on either of these teams. I think Philadelphia never really has a super good defense, so you're going to have to go out, and it's going to end up being a shootout. But neither one of these teams really stand out to me as being all-star squads or anything like that. So I think Carson Wentz is another one. I'm not really sold on him too much, and maybe you disagree with me a little bit, but I just don't see him leading the team even to the playoffs, let alone a Super Bowl or anything like that. I know you could probably make the same argument against Matt Stafford or anybody like that because he's on the Lions and they still have yet to win a playoff game with him on the roster. But Carson Wentz, I'm not a huge fan. And then you got the Redskins. Kirk Cousins can go out there and just tear it up any given Sunday. But then again, he has those Sundays that he goes out and throws 4 picks. And then it's like, well, Washington has no chance. So, the line is Philadelphia by 1. And I think it's really interesting to look at the line on this one because matchup of two teams that nobody's really sold on. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pick Washington just specifically because Kirk Cousins can go out there and have a day. And I think he will against the Philadelphia defense. But personally, this isn't really my favorite matchup. But I don't know what you see in this one. I don't see a whole lot. What about you?
I see that what you said, I think is right on. I think Kirk Cousins could come out and have a good day, but I also see that Carson Wentz could come out and have either a great day. They added Alshon Jeffrey, Nelson Aguilar is another year older, another more year experience. Torrey Smith, basically a straight line runner who's a deep threat, has been a deep threat his whole career. Are all new weapons to play with for him. Some solid tight ends as well. Zach Ertz, to namely, and that offensive line is still pretty good. The defense, they added Sidney Jones, the fourth, out of University of Washington. Who knows when he'll be ready to go? Maybe he'll be ready to go week 1. We'll see. And Rasul Douglas, another guy in their secondary, they added through the draft. So they really needed to work on their secondary and really need to recreate kind of what they did last year. And we'll see. I think they're a team that's getting better, but Washington, another question mark team, I believe. Rob Kelly is somebody that people know, but can he be an every down back that wreaks havoc on the NFC East? I'm not sure. I don't know. He's a decent player, but Terrell Pryor came over from the Browns, signed with Washington through free agency, but their weakness last year was their secondary was atrocious, even with Josh Norman, who is a great cornerback, one of the top 5, top 3 corners in the league probably. But, with Sua Cravens out and the Washington secondary didn't get any better, I see the Eagles winning this one, and I don't think it's going to be a 1-point game. I think it's going to be maybe it'll be close. I think it'll be, within 2 scores, less than 10, but I'm not seeing Washington able to keep it that close with how Kirk Cousins plays and with how the Eagles defense is just that much better than Washington's. So I'm going with the Eagles in this one.
And then moving on to Oakland at Tennessee. This one, another one that I'm not super excited about just because I'm not a huge Raiders fan, and Tennessee is always one of those teams that even when they're good, they're just kind of boring to watch for me personally. But you're looking at it, Marshawn Lynch making that return to the NFL. It's always a question mark when somebody comes back. It's not going to be like a Michael Jordan situation where he comes out and he just tears it up. So I think Marshawn, one injury can just end his career pretty easy, and Marshawn can tear it up. We've seen what he can do, puts the team on his back, carrying guys for 10 yards, 15 yards at a time. But does he still have it? Is his back okay? Is he going to be out there running around like a 50-year-old man, or is he going to be the Marshawn Lynch? I don't know. And then you look at somebody like Derek Carr. He's coming off of an injury. He hasn't played in a little while in a regular season game. And I think it's going to be interesting because we saw what happened with the Raiders last year after he went out. Raiders were absolutely lost. So now they got him back, and I think it should be interesting to see how he returns to the NFL. It might take him a couple games to get back in the swing of things, but it's going to be an interesting combo, Derek Carr and Marshawn Lynch versus Tennessee and Marcus Mariota. So I don't know. In this one, I'm going to go ahead and just pick the home team, Tennessee, because Oakland, I think they're a decent squad, and I think they're going to be in the playoffs, even though they made the playoffs last year. Great record, but without Derek Carr, they were nothing. So with Derek Carr, if he can stay healthy all season, I like the Raiders team, but I'm going to go with Tennessee in this one.
I like Tennessee, but I think I'm going to have to go with Oakland. I like what Oakland did this offseason. They added beast mode. I think the best running back in the game when he played. You're right, though, the last year with the Seahawks, his back, the last 2 years, I believe, with the Seahawks, his back was kind of acting up, a little aches and bumps and bruises here and there. And I'm glad that he got a year off, but, it's rare. I don't even think it happens that, for somebody of Adrian Peterson, Marshawn Lynch's status, that you get a year off from all of the bumps and bruises and aches and pains of an NFL season, in the prime of your career to rejuvenate and come back stronger the year after. So I like that. And, they also signed Cordero Patterson, a move that not a lot of people are talking about. And, to add to the mix of Michael Crabtree and Amari Cooper, it's looking really good for Derek Carr. Derek Carr was, he had an MVP caliber season, and the NFL is all about what have you done lately. So if Carr can recreate, some of the comebacks and big games that he had last year with a running back such as Marshawn Lynch and, another deep threat in Cordero Patterson. This is a team that could do something special, something go deep into the playoffs. But, on the other side, we have Marcus Mariota, who is, I think, one of the best up-and-coming players if he can stay healthy, if he can stay out in the field. And, you always have to worry about those one-year wonders. You think of Vince Young and guys that had one great year in the NFL, but, fell off and didn't come to play those years following. So Mariota, as much as anybody else, has all the pressure on him in the world. They added Adoree Jackson, a great cornerback out of the University of Southern California, and also Corey Davis, one of the top receivers in this year's draft. So the Titans did get better, but it's all going to depend on what Marcus Mariota can do this year. So just with all those questions, I believe in Marcus Mariota. It's going to be a great homecoming game for the Tennessee Titans, but I think the Raiders are a little too strong this year, especially adding some strength in their secondary with Gary and Connolly and Shalom Luani out of Washington State University. Go Cougs. And Khalil Mack is a threat each and every down, and he can create points on the defensive end. And I don't see anybody on Tennessee that has a playmaker like Khalil just yet. So I'm rolling with the Raiders in this one.
Now moving on to Jacksonville at Houston. This one should be an interesting one. Houston favored by 5.5. We're just talking about it. Houston, I think their weakness last year was their defense because they're missing a lot of the pieces that everybody's always like, hey, Houston's got a great defense, but without J.J. Watt, that's the centerpiece. And J.J. Watt coming back this year, I believe he missed almost all of last year with an injury. Now he's coming back, and now you got that huge guy that can rush the passer, put his hands up, block the ball, tip it up, pick it off, whatever. He does it all. So I think with Jadeveon Clowney in there, J.J. Watt, should be an easy day for, I'd say, the Houston defense against Jacksonville. Just because Jacksonville, I don't think they made too many moves in the offseason, and Jacksonville wasn't that good last year. So I think Jacksonville versus Houston, I like Houston by a lot in this one. I say they win by at least 14.
Wow, that's a lot. I personally, I'm picking Jacksonville as my sleeper team this year, a team that has all the young talent. I really like the young guy on the defensive line, Yannick Ngakoue. He's a baller. Defensive end, he was one of the top 3 picks last year, or 2 years ago when they had Jalen Ramsey and Miles Jack, and then Yannick Ngakoue was the third guy taken after that. And he's done great. Silently been a really good player on a really poor team. But what has always held them back, will continue to hold them back, is Blake Bortles. Their quarterback he just is the king of garbage time. Never keeps the team in the games, keeps the games close. But it'll be exciting to see what Leonard Fournette can do now that he's in the NFL. I hate to say that he took plays off or time off, but I firmly believe that players like him, players that have a huge, bright future, go easier those last couple years, the last year in college, so you don't get injured. You don't want a Nick Chubb situation where, you're a up-and-coming superstar. Hopefully you're going to be a superstar in the NFL, but then, you have a season-ending injury that could be catastrophic to your NFL career. So it's going to be interesting to see what Leonard Fournette can do. But on the other side, Houston going through a huge tragedy right now. J.J. Watt doing a great job of raising money, raising awareness to the Houston area. So definitely a shout out to him. Raised over $20 million, which is double his base salary. So good for him. Just trying to help out the Houston area as much as possible. And just a genuinely good dude. But outside of that, Jadeveon Clowney finally came into his own last year. No J.J. Watt. And really wreaked havoc on that defensive line. And it's kind of what the Houston fans have been waiting for, is Clowney to at least match or try to match JJ's production. And now with both of them healthy, both of them good to go, and in the primes of their careers, it's going to be tough to handle that Texans defensive line. But outside of that, A.J. Bouye moved over to Jacksonville. So their secondary, Jonathan Joseph, also for the Texans, just isn't as strong as it was last year. And the Texans had one of the best pass defenses in the NFL. So without that, it's going to be a little different this year. But in this game, I don't think that Bortles is really going to stretch the defense and really force them to do too much. So I think Houston has enough firepower, even with Tom Savage behind the helm for now, while Deshaun Watson waits in the rafters to finally get his chance to shine. DeAndre Hopkins, I'm sure, is going to ball out, as always, for the Houston Texans, one of the best receivers in the league. And they just have more firepower in Houston than Jacksonville does right now. But Jacksonville is going to be a good team, I think, this year.
And moving on to one of the marquee matchups, Arizona at Detroit. Marquee matchups for me, that is. I think this one should be a good game. Detroit at home. Sometimes they struggle in their first couple games or all season, depending on the season. But Arizona at Detroit should be interesting to watch. Stafford just signed one of the biggest deals in the NFL, and everyone's saying, he doesn't deserve it because he's never really won a playoff game. But I think Stafford has a strong arm, and I think it was a good contract boost for Stafford to keep him around and kind of stick with your franchise quarterback. So, I don't really disagree with that one at all. I think the player to watch in this one is Amir Abdullah because he was injured last year and now he's kind of coming back from that injury. But I think he's a really good back. I like his run game, and Amir Abdullah backed up by somebody like Tion Green. Tion Green in the fourth preseason game had a beast mode-like run where he was breaking ankles and he went, I think it was 80 for a touchdown. So if you can throw Tion Green into the mix behind Amir Abdullah, and then you got guys like Theo Riddick that are more of a Darren Sproles type, I think it'll be interesting to see what they do. And then Anquan Boldin, they lost him in the offseason, but then he retired anyway. So it's not really a huge loss with Anquan Boldin. They picked up Kenny Golladay, and I think he's going to be the new Anquan Boldin. He's going to be a big body. Look for him in the red zone. I think they're going to go to Kenny Golladay a little bit more than Golden Tate in the red zone or somebody like that. So I think he's going to be a nice addition. But then on the other side of the ball, you got guys like Carson Palmer and Larry Fitzgerald. So Larry Fitzgerald, always a threat. And then you got guys like Calais Campbell who are absolutely terrifying. So I think it should be an interesting matchup, but I think Detroit can handle them at home. And I'm going to go with the Lions, even though Arizona is picked by 1.5.
I could only imagine you going with your second favorite team, the Detroit Lions. And the Lions look good. They got some help for our boy, Big Play Slay. They signed Tez Tabor, another good corner out of Florida. And then they got Jared Davis, linebacker. So I've been working on that defense slowly but surely. It's the same thing, something that has, I don't want to say held them back, but it has been not their strongest point in years as of recently. Matt Stafford, does he deserve to be the highest paid player in the NFL? I'm not sure. How long does it really last that you're the highest paid player in the NFL? So for him to make a lot of money, I think that he's a staple in the NFL. His receivers are not the greatest. I do like Golden Tate. I do like Marvin Jones. But I'm not I don't think that they're going to really take him over the top and, really match up with guys like Dez or Odell and things like that. So I don't hold that against Matt Stafford. Eric Ebron is not the greatest tight end we've ever seen in the NFL. So he's a good quarterback. Him and Calvin had some great years together. And I think that, with the addition of another elite receivers, Matt Stafford could be right there with, Drew Brees and Tom Brady and all those guys that are generally the top receivers in the league. So I think this could be a good year for the Detroit Lions. But the Cardinals, on the other hand, Carson Palmer, I think he's on his way out. He had a couple of knee injuries with Cincinnati that I didn't even think that he would last this long. So he's put together a nice career. But David Johnson, one of the best running backs, if not the best, right up there with Le'Veon Bell is one of the best duo two skill set backs in the NFL. A great cutback, can run, can catch out of the backfield, does it all. But the thing is they really have Larry Fitzgerald, and who knows how long he's going to last. I think this is kind of the Cardinals' last hoorah with Carson Palmer and Larry Fitzgerald before they really get back to rebuilding. And the defense is really good still. They added Budda Baker out of the University of Washington, Patrick Peterson, and Deon Buchanan. They have a bunch of the Honey Badger, a plethora of good players. Chandler Jones is one of the elite pass rushers in the game, but I just don't think that they have enough to beat the Lions. So I think I'm going to go with you and pick the Lions in this one.
I like it. Picking the Darius Slay, Glover Quinns out there. Shout out to them.
Exactly. But then we have the second place players in the Super Bowl last year, the lead blowers, the Atlanta Falcons versus the Chicago Bears. Also the number 2 team got the number 2 pick. picked up Mitchell Trubisky, picked him over Deshaun Watson and all the other Patrick Mahomes, all the other quarterbacks as somebody that the Chicago Bears really believe in. And I thought that he might have a decent year. I thought it would be good for him to have Victor Cruz, a guy who was on their team in the preseason, but then they cut Victor Cruz and they really don't have anything. They have Jordan Howard, a running back that who knows how he's going to do on the Bears, and Mitchell Trubisky. They really don't have anything that's even name brand. I looked at their secondary, and they have, I think, Prince Amukamara and Quentin Demps. Outside of that, they don't have a whole lot going for them. I'm going to be honest. They're going to be right there with the Jets and the Bills, vying for that number one spot. We'll hopefully get some more help offensively because they're just a team that needs a lot. They need a lot. And the Falcons, although I did make fun of them, they did lose, blow a, 24, 25-point lead late to the Patriots in the Super Bowl. Very not clutch, very not Matty Ice-like. But, with Julio Jones on your team and Devontae Freeman, Matt Ryan, the reigning MVP, Vic Beasley coming into his own on the defensive line, the team has good things to look up to. Takaris McKinley, their first-round pick, going to hold it down in the middle of the field. And Desmond Trufant, who missed a lot of last season, especially late in the season, will be back there at corner. So with him and Keanu Neal and a couple other guys, it's looking like a good season for the Falcons. I think they have way more talent than the Chicago Bears can even fathom right now. So I'm going with the Falcons in this one.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you. Atlanta tore it up last year in the passing game, and they can switch it up on the ground. And either way they go, it's really going to be interesting to see what Atlanta can do. They've got some quick guys that they can just dump the ball off to real quick and have them go for 70 sometimes. So I think it'll be interesting to see how Matt Ryan reacts to it. But then you look at somebody like Chicago, they had Jeremy Langford as their running back, and I had high hopes for him out of Michigan State and able to run behind that line. So, they tried switching up all these guys. Now you got Jordan Howard out there trying to make a living at running back for the Bears, and everybody's pretty hyped about Jordan Howard and picking him up on their fantasy team and everything like that. But I'm not super sold on Jordan Howard yet, like you said. And then Trubisky, I think he had a decent preseason, and everybody's kind of getting excited about that too. But I'm not super sold on Mitchell Trubisky either. So I think it should be interesting to see what Chicago does. I think it's going to be another 4-12 season for them, or 5-11 this year. But I think Atlanta wipes them clean. I think they beat them by 14-21 in this one.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun one. Next, we have Baltimore taking on the Cincinnati Bengals. The Ravens, one of my favorite teams, second favorite team, got my purple on. Right next to the Seahawks, Joe Flacco has a new weapon. Jeremy Maclin joined the team to join Mike Wallace and Brashard Perriman. Ben Watson is back, 36 years old now, but a solid tight end. Could obviously be doing better than a 36-year-old tight end. Nothing against Ben Watson, but it's going to be an interesting year. The defense kind of reloaded. They got, who did they get? They got Marlon Humphrey, Tyus Bowser, and Tim Williams out of Alabama. Humphrey and Williams teammates over there at Alabama. So two of their top three picks, Bama products. What you'd expect from Harbaugh and the Ravens team, defense driven as always. T. Sizzle, another year older. Eric Weddle still holding it down there in the secondary. So they still have some good things going for them. Offensively, it's always been the downfall for the Baltimore Ravens. But on the other side of Cincinnati, doing real well this season. And I expect Andy Dalton to have a much better year. A Pro Bowl caliber quarterback who just had a down year last year. Added John Ross, the fastest man to ever run the 40-yard dash. So it's going to be exciting to see what him and A.J. Green can do. Definitely can't double team either of them because then you have Tyler Eifert open. So Andy Dalton has all the weapons to win this year. They also added Joe Mixon. I'm not sure how you feel about some of his off-field issues. Regardless, here or there, as a football player, he's pretty good. Who knows what type of carries he'll get this year in the backfield for the Bengals. A lot of fantasy people believe he's the top guy, but they still have other guys as well. So it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out there in Cincinnati. But the defense, as always, Pac-Man Jones suspended, Vontez Burfict suspended, and it's what you would expect for Pac-Man, fighting with the police, whether he's innocent, which he claims he is, or he's guilty, which everyone else claims he is. At the end of the day, he's got to be the best cornerback of all time. I think it's a done deal that Pac-Man is a Hall of Famer, because with as much police work that goes into dealing with him, he's still doing it on NFL rosters. So shout out to Pac-Man Jones for just making a career out of being amazing. He's got to be an amazing cornerback. That's all the only conclusion I could come up with, because, man, what a headache. But, neither here nor there. And Vontez Burfict, you could say, whatever you want. It was a late hit, or I'm not sure. It was pretty cheap, I'll say that. So, the NFL reducing his suspension to 3 games is fair. Initially, I thought, it wasn't as bad as it looked, but it was pretty bad. I'm not going to lie. It was not a good look. It was not very representative of how the NFL should be played. But he got what he deserved. 3 games for him, 1 game for Pac-Man for his off-field, Pac-Man's off-field issues. But, with all of that, all of those distractions, and I like the Ravens anyway, in a divisional game, I'm going with the Ravens.
I think I'm going to disagree with you in this one. I'm going to go with Cincinnati. You covered all their weapons. You got guys like A.J. Green and Andy Dalton, although not the greatest quarterback of all time, he is pretty efficient sometimes. So if he just goes out there and finds A.J. Green, starts finding his receivers, I think they can get things going on that side. And like you said, Pac-Man Jones got to be the greatest corner of all time, because he's been arrested probably 7-8 times and keeps resurfacing. You got guys that go out there and get DUIs and the teams cut them right away. So I don't know how Pac-Man Jones is still in the league personally, but that should be interesting to see. And then you mentioned Joe Mixon. I heard things that the reason that he slipped so far down is because of his off-field troubles, but they said he was easily a first-round pick, and it would have been a high first-round pick if he didn't have the off-field troubles. So I think they got a steal in him, because if he can actually keep his head in the game and he can stay on the field, I think obviously college is way different than the NFL, but then you can put your off-field troubles aside. I think he has the chance to show some flashes of greatness. So I'm going with Cincinnati in this one. And Joe Flacco coming off that injury, I'm not sure exactly how his back's doing. I'm sure they're just going to shoot him up with cortisone before the game or something like that. He'll be high on all kinds of smelling salts and everything like that. But, I'm just not real sold on Joe Flacco when he's injured, coming off of an injury. And it's going to be interesting to see what Baltimore does with them, if they're going to experiment with some other quarterbacks down the line, or if they're going to stick with them all season, depending on how that injury holds up. But I'm going with Cincinnati in this one. I like them at home, and Baltimore I'm not super sold on anyway. So like you said, some of their secondary getting older, and I'm going to disagree with you, and I'm going to pick Cincinnati in this one.
All right. Well, we'll stay here in the AFC North. And we also have Pittsburgh taking on the Cleveland Browns. The Cleveland Browns are still the Cleveland Browns. I will say that to start it off. But I'm very proud. I think it was one of the best draft classes that I've seen from any team in a while. We got Myles Garrett, the first pick. Then we had Jabril Peppers, David Njoku, Deshaun Kaiser, Caleb Brantley, and Zane Gonzalez. And the Zane Gonzalez and Caleb Brantley were respectively, Zane being a kicker, one of the best kickers in the nation last year. Caleb Brantley was believed to be one of the best D-tackle prospects off the field issues and some other concerns. Dropped him down a lot of boards. Jabril Peppers, same way. I think one of the top, if not the best defensive player in the draft class. But, I'm not sure what dropped him down draft boards, but he was there at the end of the first round. They picked up a tight end and Deshaun Kaiser, a quarterback that a lot of people are excited about. So I think the Browns did a really good job. They signed Jason McCourty, really got their offensive line revamped to help their running game a little bit more. They don't have a quarterback just yet. Every down, a franchise type of guy. So it's always up in the air with teams that don't really have a franchise guy just yet. And then they just released, their best corner in Joe Hayden. So Definitely a rebuild. I think they're definitely going to be a middle of the road team, but I don't think they'll be the laughing stock of the NFL this year. But with that being said, they are facing off against the Pittsburgh Steelers, where their star corner Joe Hayden just went. The Steelers, fortunately, they convinced Ben Roethlisberger, Big Ben, to come back and play at least one more year after he contemplated retirement. Antonio Brown, Juju Smith-Schuster, all draft picks, and then Martavius Bryant, who was suspended all of last season for smoking some weed, which is crazy. But he's back. His last game was played in 2016 or 2015 against the Super Bowl champion that year, Denver Broncos. He had 9 receptions for 194 total yards. So a guy that can ball, a guy that can show up in big games, and added with Juju Smith-Schuster, a possession guy who can make plays, and Antonio Brown, one of the most electrifying and I think best wide receivers in the game, along with Le'Veon Bell, who reported to the team September 1st because of his holdout. Although with all that turmoil and everything in the team, I think that they're just more talented, top to bottom, even on defensively, without speaking of James Harrison and some of those other guys out there on defense that are just a lot better than what Cleveland can offer right now. So I'm going with the Steelers in this one.
Yeah, I don't think you need to argue too much with your pick because Steelers are just going to go out and roll. They still are the Browns, and like you said, they might not be the 1 or 2 win Browns that we've seen in the past, but they still are the Browns. And you got guys like Antonio Brown out there, and like you said, Martavis Bryant coming out there, and he should be able to light it up as well. And we saw guys even like Marcus Wheaton tearing it up with Pittsburgh. So I think any of their receivers can just go out and have a day. When you got a guy like Antonio Brown out there where he's going to be double and triple covered at times, it's going to leave somebody open. You can throw a special teams guy out there and he can have a day because people are going to be worried about Antonio Brown. But I don't really read too far into the Browns draft picks or anything like that. I think it should be interesting to see how Casey Williams fits into the team because they just signed him after the Hawks released him. There was a big social media frenzy and they went out and signed him. So I think Casey Williams, this is your chance to make a name for yourself with Cleveland, but in this one, not yet. I'm going with Pittsburgh.
Yes, Pittsburgh it is. Also, before we get into the Sunday afternoon games, one last game that we would like to talk about is Miami and Tampa Bay has been postponed until week 11, we believe, as of now anyway. And definitely something to pray about and, hope that everyone in Miami and, the Puerto Rico and all those islands, the Caribbean, that they're okay, that they are all good for this weekend. And, some of the things that are coming with the hurricanes, that they're all safe and that they get what they need. And, if they have to rebuild and do whatever they need to do. So that game is being canceled. Brian, if you would like to say anything, feel free. That's all I had to say about that.
Yeah, and it's something that makes you kind of stop and think, there is stuff that's way bigger than football. And that's the thing. They postponed the game because they're like, hey, we don't really want to move this to a different location and play it that way because, there's people's lives at risk and everything like that. And we just saw what Hurricane Harvey did down in Houston. And like you said, J.J. Watt out here raising $20 million. So I think it says a lot about his character and what kind of guy he is. But, you see all these people. I think the death toll was up to 60 in Houston. And it's scary because this hurricane that's coming in is, I think they said, the entire distance of Florida. So if it rolls through, the whole state of Florida is in danger. And they said Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands, Barbados, everywhere around there, it's in great danger. So I think they did the right thing by rescheduling this football game, not putting anybody's lives in danger and not trying to come out here and say football is more important than this hurricane. We're just going to move it over here for now and call it good. So like you said, hope everybody's okay moving forward. And, these hurricanes, hopefully an end is near and we don't have another one right behind that one because seeing the damage that it's done in Houston and hopefully this one isn't nearly as bad in Florida, but hopefully we can get past that and limit how many people are injured in this one or how many people it claims in this one. So, like you said, hurricanes not a good thing and natural disasters rarely are a good thing. So, hoping everybody can move past that and then hopefully it's not as bad as it sounds right now. So we'll see what happens with that one, but hopefully everyone can stay safe out there.
Absolutely. Definitely stay safe on the East Coast. Over here on the West Coast, Sunday afternoon football kicks off with the Los Angeles Rams playing host to the Indianapolis Colts, who will be without Andrew Luck. No luck this Sunday for the Colts. They will be rolling out with Scott Tolzien and Frank Gore out to ball out in LA. So it's going to be a rough one, I believe, for the Colts. T.Y. Hilton, definitely a good player. Dante Moncrief, also a very good player. But with Scott Tolzien, can you really win a football game? I'm not sure. I'm not a huge Scott Tolzien believer. I apologize if you are. But on the other side, I also am not a huge Jared Goff believer, although he has plenty of new weapons to work with. He stole, however you want to say it, the Bills receivers from last year, Sammy Watkins and Robert Woods, both on the Rams opening day roster, along with Cooper Kupp. Shout out to Eastern Washington University. And the defense, I mean, they're NFC West team, so their defense is obviously always respectable. And Johnny Hekker, best punter in the game. So the Rams got a lot of things going for them. The Colts don't have a whole lot of things going for them. They did get Malik Hooker in the draft, so that was a real positive Ohio State product. But with Scott Tolzien and aging Frank Gore, who knows how long he'll be able to keep it up. We talk about guys like Marshawn Lynch getting to that 30 range. Frank Gore has been around a lot longer. Very productive, a good running back, a great running back, potentially a Hall of Fame running back. I just don't think that this day and age, Frank Gore is that scary. And I like the Rams defense, so I think I'm going with the Rams in this one, especially at home.
Yeah, Frank Gore is going to be your starter. I'm not real sold on Frank Gore. He used to be great with San Francisco, and they used to have some scary teams. But like you said, he's aging, and on Indianapolis, I thought, maybe he's a backup or a third down guy. But if he's going to be their starter, you could be in trouble. And then Scott Tolzien, he's not really a guy that you look at and think Super Bowl right away. So I think if Andrew Luck was playing, it would be a little bit different. But even Indianapolis last year, they opened with Detroit, and they ended up tanking it at the end. And Detroit, I think, put up over 40 points on them. So if Detroit can go out there and put 40 points on them and they can't beat Detroit's defense last year, then not really sold on them going into LA and running up points without Andrew Luck on the LA Rams. And like you said, they pick up Sammy Watkins, and they got some new weapons on offense. And I think it'll be interesting for Jared Goff, because Jared Goff, I think, was a great quarterback in college, even though he struggled sometimes and his team struggled sometimes in college, didn't have the best guys around him. And now he's got some actually look around and fire downfield and see what happens, because with those guys, you can just put the ball up and hopefully somebody's going to come down with it. But you can't get a lot of those guys out there. And even with the Seahawks, you got guys like Doug Baldwin and everything like that in the NFC West. But I think they've got maybe one of the best receiving cores in the NFC West right now. And it's going to be crazy to watch them unfold against Indianapolis, who is hurting at this point, literally, with Andrew Luck on the bench. So I think LA goes out there, and I don't think that they're going to roll easily, just because it is LA and they like to make games interesting, 6 and everything like that. But I think in this one, they're going to go out and win by at least a touchdown, just specifically because Indianapolis, I don't expect them to be able to score very many points.
Yeah. Speaking of not being able to score very many points, we have the Seattle Seahawks going in to Lambeau Field to start off the hottest game of the season. I don't think hot weather-wise, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think it's going to be a hot game, but I meant hot as in like popular game. A lot of people are going to be watching. It's going to be an important game. I believe the Packers and Seahawks are arguably the two best teams in the NFC, at least on paper anyways, to start the season. The Seahawks, a lot of people, everyone's coming back. Lockett is now healthy. Earl Thomas healthy. Michael Bennett healthy. And Sheldon Richardson coming over in the trade with Jermaine Kearse is a huge addition. Eddie Lacy meeting all of his weight requirements. to get his bonuses, and with very low expectations. I haven't heard a lot of expectations or greatness surrounding Eddie Lacy's name in NFL circles. So with him not being, talked about highly of, and the receiving game not doing terrible, I think definitely an upgrade whether Jermaine Kearse is there or not. Um, Things are looking good, and the defense has only got better with Sheldon Richardson. We're still waiting on this to see when or if Malik McDowell will play this year. The Seahawks second round, first draft pick, but not in the first round. Does that make sense? But yes, and then the only thing that I wouldn't want to say worries me about the Seahawks is just something that is unsure is the secondary, and it's that number 2 corner in the secondary. Cam Earl and Richard Sherman. You know what you're going to get out of the Legion of Boom, but don't know what I'm going to get out of Jeremy Lane or Shaquille Griffin. I'm kind of upset, sad that the Seahawks didn't go out and get Joe Hayden or even give Darrelle Revis a call to see what he can do. I think, having a veteran guy as that 4th guy in the secondary, second corner, whatever you want to call it, would be huge. But I guess, I'm not there at every practice. I'm not in every team meeting, so I don't know what Pete and John and all of those guys are seeing that, maybe we're not seeing in the preseason. But I wasn't overly impressed with either Griffin or Jeremy Lane. So we'll see once the season starts. But on the other side, Aaron Rodgers, a great quarterback, one of the greats, definitely a future Hall of Famer. Is coming back with his whole arsenal as usual, added Martellus Bennett to his tight end. So, Randall Cobb and Devontae Adams and Jordy Nelson will all be there. Ty Montgomery, some new competition in the backfield there with Jamal Williams, a rookie. But I think Ty Montgomery has everything that he needs. Trevor Davis, another receiver, returning. And the team pretty much looks basically the same. Clay Matthews, and they did add Kevin King, University of Washington corner, in the second round there. It was sad the Seahawks didn't pick him up, but that's okay. I'm happy for Kevin, and we'll see what he and Blake Martinez, another Pac-12 product, can do on that Packers defense. But I'm a Seahawk to the end, so I think that Russell is going to have a huge year this game and this year. He always shows up in the big games when the Seahawks need him most, and I think he's going to be MVP this year. So I'm going with the Hawks in this one.
Yeah, this one, Thomas Rawls, allegedly questionable, but like you said, Eddie Lacy going to step in and see what he can do. And like you said, it's not really hyped like the rest of the running backs have been. So Marshawn Lynch, there was a lot of hype behind him for a good reason, but then Eddie Lacy, they were looking at probably 4 or 5 running backs, landed on Eddie Lacy, and nobody's really talking about him. And I think he went super low in fantasy drafts, so he steps up. And if they can get CJ Procise going and kind of use him like a Darren Sproles or a Theo Riddick type, I think that'll be good to get him going. As long as he can stay healthy all year, I think the Hawks will be good. Other side of the ball, Aaron Rodgers, and I don't think anybody would have thought when they got Ty Montgomery that this guy would be their starting running back or an electrifying running back or anything like that. So he went from being a 4th or 5th receiver teams to there. So I think it was definitely a come up for him. Yep, now I'm your starting running back. So I do like Ty Montgomery as a running back, but he is quick and he can get to the line. The Hawks have guys like Dunner trying to prove that they belong on the team, like you said. Griffin trying to step in the secondary. And honestly, I wasn't super impressed with him either in the preseason. He had some that he got burned on, and then he gets his hands up at the last minute, or he pops it loose, and kind of looked like he got lucky a little bit. But everybody is super sold on him, and I hear him talked about more than anybody else on the team. Personally, not a huge fan of Jeremy Lane. I just think he's too small for the secondary, and I haven't really liked his play as of late. Last couple of years, he hasn't really shown flashes of greatness or anything like that. So I think, like you touched on, the secondary, you got guys like Earl, you got guys like Sherman, you got guys like Cam, always going to go out there and just put a hurt on people. But then you got guys like Shaquille Griffin who are going to go out there and you don't really know what you have, or Jeremy Lane. So that poor spot is going to be really interesting to see what the Hawks do there. And I don't know, I think they might try to experiment a little bit and kind of run some guys through there and see who can fit in that role and see what they can do. But probably not a good time to be experimenting with things against Aaron Rodgers. But like we said, we are Seahawks fans. We got to go with the Hawks. And I think the Hawks end up winning on a last-second field goal or something like that. Blair Walsh trying to be the MVP. We'll see if he can come up clutch and start kicking field goals in the Midwest again, because the last time he tried that didn't work out too well. But I think he'll be fine with the Hawks. And even though everyone was super mad when they picked him up, I think he's the kicker that the Hawks are going to stick with all year. So either you like him or you don't. I think they made the right decision by picking him up. So I think he kicks a game winner in this one.
I would like that. A game winner would be nice. But moving on to Carolina Panthers facing off against the San Francisco 49ers. Cam Newton coming back from shoulder surgery, had a little minor scope surgery earlier this offseason and is now back fully with the team, fully practicing, all of the above. They also added Christian McCaffrey with their number one pick, superstar stud running back who I don't know if he's going to share carries or take all the carries away from Jonathan Stewart. But Curtis Samuel, another guy, a home run hitter, a wide receiver, super fast. A new weapon for Cam Newton. And the defense pretty much the same. They got some new safeties, Kurt Coleman and Mike Evans. After Josh Norman left them last season for Washington, they really struggled back there. It was something that was an obvious missing piece. So they got out and went and did some work this last offseason, picked up Christian McCaffrey en route, and are looking a lot better. Luke Kuechly, Thomas Davis, all of those guys look ready to go full throttle. And the 49ers look terrible, still do. They are going with Brian Hoyer. Brian Hoyer through 2015, he threw 4 picks and got shut out 30-0 at home in a playoff game. So definitely don't have any faith in this guy being a superstar coming out of San Francisco. Really no weapons to play with. I believe Pierre Garçon is his top option. Carlos Hyde, I think, is a good running back, a really good running back, one of the best in the league. But playing on this team is it's not gonna work. It's not gonna happen. Defensively, they're a really good team, up and coming. Eric Armstead, Reuben Foster, a great pickup for them, and somebody that's needed, a heavy hitting linebacker. DeForest Buckner and Solomon Thomas, also great picks for the 49ers. They're really stacking up on that defense, something that's been missing as of recently, but they definitely don't have enough firepower to hang with the Panthers or pretty much any team, especially with the ownership there in San Francisco. So I'm going with the Panthers in this one.
Yeah, Brian Hoyer really getting the raw end of some of these deals. He's on Cleveland, and he's probably the best player on the team on a 2-14 team, and now he ends up on San Francisco. Love the guy at Michigan State, huge Michigan State fan, so I got to roll with Brian Hoyer, but can't pick him in this matchup specifically because he's on the 49ers. And Carlos Hyde, great running back, but Pierre Garçon, he's kind of getting up there, and he was really good. Now that he's on the 49ers, is he going to have like a Crabtree type season where he goes out and he's okay, but then gets called mediocre by one of the best corners in the game? Who knows? I don't think Pierre Garçon is really that guy, but then you look at Carlos Hyde, he can have a day, but when you got guys like Brian Hoyer starting, it's pretty much just saying we're going to toss in the towel right now, and I might as well have gone with Kaepernick at that point, because if you're going to start Brian Hoyer over somebody like Colin Kaepernick, then it's really a toss-up, because you're like, hey, this guy has had a little bit of success, but wasn't able to do anything in the playoffs. He's not going to be able to make the playoffs with the 49ers. So I think when you look at it on a team like the Browns, Brian Hoyer played okay, but he wasn't one of those guys that are just going to turn your team around and make the Pro Bowl, take your team to the Super Bowl, any of that. So I'm going to go with Carolina on this one. Cam Newton's going to have a day. And then, like you said, Christian McCaffrey, everybody was staring at him, mouth wide open, like, what is this guy doing? This guy is amazing while he's at Stanford. I don't think it's going to be any different when he goes to Carolina. He's got a whole team around him, and a guy like Cam Newton, I don't know if they're going to start throwing more flags for Cam Newton this year or not. I know he was upset last year that he's taken the most hits of any quarterback, but I think Carolina rolls in this one. I don't see San Francisco even coming close in that matchup.
Yeah, rolling into the one last Sunday game. the Sunday night game, the Cowboys versus the Giants in Jerry's World at Cowboys Stadium. Eli Manning playing with the three best receivers in the league, the best trio anyway, I believe. It could be a quartet, depending on if Evan Ingram can really hold it down straight out of Ole Miss. He can hold it down at tight end. Sterling Shepard, Odell Beckham Jr., and Brandon Marshall, B. Marsh, the three receivers that Eli gets to play with this year. It's all going to depend if Paul Perkins can really be the running back there, the answer for the Giants. Overall, on the other side, Dak Prescott, we'll see if he can avoid the sophomore slump. Dez Bryant, you know what you're going to get out of Dez. And Ezekiel Elliott, the 6-game suspension was upheld. Who knows what's going to go on with that? I see it kind of being like the Tom Brady thing. The NFL always needs some story to talk about all season long. Who knows how long it'll drag out? Who knows when it'll get resolved? But that's the story now. The Cowboys got it. Zeke, 6 games for his off-the-field issues, whatever they may truly are not. Either way, Zeke not looking good for him, but the offensive line looking great. Jason Witten back another year, and we'll see what the rest of the running game for the Cowboys has with or without Zeke. I think they'll be fine regardless of who it is. I think everyone said all last year, it doesn't matter. They could pick a fan and run behind that offensive line, and I guess we're going to get a chance to see that. We'll see who they choose, who's going to be the running back for the Cowboys this year. Maybe they'll just do a drawing. You never know. But it's looking good for them regardless. The Giants' defense is always looking good with Landon Collins, arguably had one of the best defensive years a safety has ever had in the NFL. Let's see if he can replicate it or even continue to build upon that. JPP, with his very few fingers that he has, had a silently good year. Let's see if he can continue to play well there on the defensive line. It's the NFL is all about what have you done lately. So if they can continue to play well, they're all good players. Eli Apple and Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie, Janoris Jenkins, also additions for or also in the secondary for the Giants. And Dallas has kind of tried to work on their defense, but it's definitely been what has held them back as of recent years. So if they can get a Jalen Smith, their draft pick last year, who got hurt in the Fiesta Bowl of his last collegiate game when Notre Dame took on Ohio State. Let's see if he can get back and get healthy. Sat out last year with a knee injury. So they're getting some key pieces. Taco Charlton from Michigan was their first-round draft pick. So the defense is getting better, but we'll see what it can do. But I'm going with the Giants because I just think that nobody can stop Odell Beckham Jr. And I believe in Eli, at least in this game. So they had their number last year, 2 games, beat them. And so I'm rolling with them again this year. So I'm going Giants again.
Well, when you say nobody can stop Odell, I don't know if you saw the field goal net last year. He's definitely stopped by the field goal net. And I just don't know. Odell always has some type of antics on the sideline or always involved in something. But he was pretty good at dancing in the Pro Bowl. So maybe we'll get lucky enough to see him score a touchdown and have some kind of a crazy touchdown dance or something. But when you look at Dallas, it's going to be interesting because Ezekiel Elliott will play in week 1. So it's going to be crazy to see him come out after everyone's like, he's going to be out week 1. It's going to be Darren McFadden that's going to be going for Dallas. And then all of a sudden they're like, well, because of the timing of the suspension, Ezekiel Elliott's going to play week 1, but he won't week 2. Onward from there. So I think if Dallas loses week 1 without Ezekiel Elliott or with Ezekiel Elliott, and then they're without Ezekiel Elliott for 6 weeks, I think they could be in trouble. But Darren McFadden, I think, will be serviceable for the time being for week 2. Then, like you said, Eli Manning's going to go out there and just look for his receivers, the trio. I know that we talk about New York all the time having some of the best receivers in the game, and Odell's another one of those guys. Is he going to need to be double teamed, and is he going to leave other receivers open? Probably just throw in a special teams guy at that point and have him get open. So it's another type. You're looking at Aaron Rodgers and, Antonio Brown, guys like that. They can always just find somebody. Tom Brady, it's always a threat. You can put in a 5th-string receiver, have him tear it up. Aaron Rodgers can do that for you, and then Antonio Brown can kind of draw guys off. So I think Odell's another one, like Antonio Brown, that's really going to draw some attention, and then you can look for other receivers and see what happens. And Dez, like you said, always plays well at home. He does have a little bit of a temper, and can throw some tantrums on the sideline, but Dez is a good player, and with Ezekiel Elliott and Dez out there, should be a good matchup. And although I hate to say it, I'm going to go ahead and pick the Cowboys in this one.
Oh, look at that. The Cowboys, huh? That's all right. Well, we got a huge game Monday night leading off the Monday night game, 2 Monday night games. But the big story is Adrian Peterson returning to Minnesota while he's playing with the Saints. So him and Drew Brees and company are going to go in to Minnesota and take on his old team, the Vikings, who are looking good. Outside of Sam Bradford, they're a really good-looking team. Dalvin Cook is a decent replacement for Adrian Peterson. To put the expectations of Adrian Peterson on anybody, even players that are in the NFL now, it's not realistic. He's one of the greats, one of the greatest of all time. And I think that he's going to go crazy. I think he's going to have a great game. Returning back to Minnesota, I think maybe he felt like they did him wrong, especially towards the end of his career. You kind of saw that relationship coming to an end the last few years, if you were paying any sort of attention to what was going on with the Vikings organization. And they're looking decent. I would like to see them use Laquan Treadwell. The run game, Dalvin Cook is a question mark. Sam Bradford, who knows what he can do with the receivers that he has with Stephon Diggs. And the defense is really what has held that team together. So I think the defense will be strong as always. It'll be interesting to see what the offense can do. But on the other side, Drew Brees is one of the best, if not the best quarterback this game has ever seen. So I know he's going to come to play. He's going to be prepared. And with a guy like Adrian Peterson in the backfield, it's going to be nothing but open holes all day for AP. And I think Drew Brees is one of those guys I would love to see guys like Adrian Peterson, some of his friends, some of the other greats in the NFL succeed. And I think that they're just going to feed AP the ball, and he's going to be in beast mode and just go crazy. So I'm going with the Saints in this one, although I believe the Vikings are favored.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the Saints also. Whenever somebody thinks of the Minnesota Vikings, they always think Adrian Peterson first. And now it's going to be weird looking up and seeing Adrian Peterson in gold and black, because usually he's all in that purple. He's been in purple his whole career, and now all of a sudden he's in that Saints gold. So it's going to be weird seeing Adrian Peterson on New Orleans. And you got guys like Adam Thielen on the other side for Minnesota. And then you have Stephon Diggs, guys like that. And then Dalvin Cook stepping in. Saw guys like Matt Asiata, Jerick McKinnon try to make it last year. And they're serviceable for the most part. But like you said, not even close to Adrian Peterson. You can't put that tag on somebody and say, Adrian Peterson's gone, you're our new guy, go be Adrian Peterson, because it doesn't work that way. You got guys in the first round that can sometimes tear it up, and then others that just don't live up to the hype. So you never really know what you have with some of these guys that you're just plugging in there. And the Saints, you know what you have, exactly what you have in Drew Brees. He can go out there and throw for 400 yards and just light you up. And not really sold on Minnesota's defense per se against a guy like Drew Brees. And then you got guys like Sam Bradford that you're going to plug in at quarterback that I'm not sold on Sam Bradford at all. And I don't think he's really a good player. And, you know, he was okay with the Rams, but then there's a reason that the Rams didn't bring him back and kind of go with him. With a franchise quarterback like Matt Stafford or somebody like that, you want to keep the guy around. But Sam Bradford, you saw it last season. He was pretty good to start the season. Everyone got super excited. And then end of the season, it was like, well, now we're trying to squeak into the playoffs, and Minnesota ended up doing nothing. So I'm just not really sold on Sam Bradford at all, and I think it is going to be a long day for Minnesota, even though they are favored. I think the Saints go out there and just tear them up.
Yeah, and lastly, the last game of the night, the Chargers and the Denver Broncos. An AFC West game. Denver, I think they're struggling on offense. Who knows what's going on with Paxton Lynch? Who knows if he's even any good? Trevor Siemian again getting the opening day start. And Demaryius Thomas, all of those guys. Jamal Charles is the new addition. Also another guy with very low expectations that could just change the game, flip the whole NFL on its head. If he can come back out and have a great season, he could be a dynamic addition for the Broncos offense. Defensively, they're pretty much the same team. No TJ Ward. I know he's now on the Buccaneers. They just cut ties with him altogether. But Chris Harrison, Aqib Talib, I believe the two best two corners on the same team, however you want to call that. I believe that they're the best duo of corners in the league. And Von Miller, I believe one of the best, if not the best, defensive player in the NFL, to go along with Brandon Marshall and a couple other top names on that defensive line. So Denver looking strong to start the season, and the Chargers are reeling there. Phillip Rivers, who knows if he can ever reclaim his 2013 or even earlier in his prime that form, but with him getting older, Antonio Gates getting older, and not very many successors coming up behind them, it's hard to see the silver lining. And now Los Angeles Chargers, no longer San Diego, but now in LA. And on top of all that, going into Denver is never easy. Different altitude, different game style, and they're former champions that still have a strong core of players. So I'm going with Denver in this one. I don't think it's going to be very close.
Yeah, and I'm not super sold on Trevor Siemian at all, but Phillip Rivers, you touched on it. He's not really the greatest quarterback of all time or anything like that. And every time Phillip Rivers goes out there, you're like, is it going to be the Phillip Rivers that throws 4 picks, or is it going to be the Phillip Rivers that throws for 350 and 3 touchdowns? So it's really interesting with Phillip Rivers out there as your starting quarterback. And then you got guys like Antonio Gates. He is maybe one of the greatest tight ends of all time, but I believe he's 1 touchdown away from tying the all-time record for scores. So it's going to be a good season for Antonio Gates regardless, as long as he gets more than 1 touchdown. But I don't see him going out there and tearing anybody up. But I think they're going to look for him in the red zone. Maybe when they get to the 5 or the 10-yard line, it's going to be Antonio Gates. But I don't think he's the same Antonio Gates that just goes out there and has a day. And he's not the Pro Bowl Antonio Gates or anything like that. So should be a decent season for Antonio Gates as long as he can get those 2 touchdowns, but has it anymore. And Phillip Rivers, he is aging too, and he's just one of those guys that against the Seahawks, he'll play the best game of his life, and then against other teams, he'll throw 5 picks the next week. So not really sold on the Chargers, but still kind of beefing that they moved from San Diego. I think they belong in San Diego, and they come up to LA with the LA Rams, which nobody is super excited about the LA Rams to begin with. Everyone is pumped they got a team, and then midway through the season, they're like, oh, we got the LA Rams, cool. And everybody started leaving the stadium, and now they got the Chargers, which is another team that I think belongs in San Diego. But Trevor Siemian with Jamal Charles, I think, should be a decent duo, even though Trevor Siemian's not anything like Peyton Manning. You can't fill in for Peyton Manning like the Adrian Peterson, Dalvin Cook comparison. But I think Jamal Charles can just come in there and tear it up. And he's another guy that's aging, and you never really know. Once a running back hits 30, 31 and older, then you're like, uh-oh, their time is limited. So Jamal Charles, tons of knee injuries, and he's going to come out there and try to prove that he is healthy. And hopefully the mascots can stay out of the way, because the Lions mascot was the one that tore his ACL or something that one time, because he ended up slipping and rolling into the mascot or something like that. But who knows what's going to happen with Denver, because you go from somebody like Kansas City, where you're just one of the greats, and then end up on a team like Denver, who is always a playoff caliber team, even when you don't have a guy like Peyton Manning. So I like Denver in this one just because I'm not really sold on the Chargers yet. And even though I'm not sold on Trevor Siemian as a quarterback, I think they do have guys like Demaryius Thomas that can just go out there and put fear in the defense, and then guys like Jamal Charles that can change the game as well. So I'm going with Denver at the altitude. I'm going to stick with them by a touchdown.
Very nice. Well, I think that about wraps it up for the Revolutionary Sports Show. Thank you all for listening and watching to our first episode of the 2017 NFL season. And hopefully our picks are right. So definitely keep us in your thoughts this weekend while you're watching the games, or even Thursday night when you're watching the game. And we'll be back next week to see how we did, and bring you our week 2 predictions. So I'm your co-host Corey Sullivan.
I'm Brian.
And we'll see you guys next week.
We'll see you next week.